basically precedes most of what's happening today as well, where a diesel will do that at 1500. It was a square engine and it could do about kilometers an hour. Why it didn't go overseas was because of various factors. Well guys, here we are again with another very interesting one, the Green Mamba. This was a really cool project back in the mid-90s. It came about from a very specific set of circumstances, which was also quite cool, which is basically the spine of Land Rover. Basically, they take opportunities and they run with them. And this one came out of South Africa, of all places. A lot of local developments going on there in the mid-90s especially. It was the end of apartheid. The international market had opened up again. There were a lot of initiatives from the local manufacturing industry to promote export possibilities, if you like. Land Rover was in the mix in this as well, except in this case, unlike the Parenti, which we know from Australia, this was a very different proposition, where you had in the Parenti a very low revving, low torque, low power, plodding engine. In this case, it was something completely different. It came about in 1994 because BMW bought Land Rover from British Aerospace. They took it over and they were going to run with it. They took over the Rover group, which included Mini and MG as well, and Rover, and Land Rover was part of the mix. Land Rover was actually doing quite well. It was one of the better sections of British Leyland at the time. They were making a profit. Their vehicles were popular around the world. Export business was good. And they even ended up in South Africa. And in South Africa, Land Rover had already set up a manufacturing plant in a suburb called Blackheath in Cape Town. What they did then in '94 is BMW arrived in South Africa as well. I think the Rosslyn plant was the first BMW plant outside of Germany to do this back in the day. And they said, look, guys, Land Rover's in Blackheath in Cape Town. We're in Pretoria, which is north of Joburg, in a place called Rosslyn. We are going to move the Land Rover business up to Rosslyn as well. Logistics involved, all of that stuff. Much easier proposition. At the time, BMW, very interestingly enough, in South Africa was doing quite interesting things. South Africa was quite a rogue market, in a way, quite similar to Australia, where Australia you had the Fords and the Holdens of this day, which was specifically for the local market. You know, big motors. In South Africa, we had the Piranha Capris, which is rather cool, V8s in a Capri. We had the Sierra XR8, which is also quite local, and BMW got in the mix with the 333i, which is pretty cool. A 3.2 six-cylinder high power engine, which basically came out the same time as the M4, the M3, which had a 4-cylinder engine in Europe. So they were doing good stuff. One of the biggest ones, maybe not well known, was the 745i. And basically what BMW done with the 745, this is when the badging also changed. It wasn't a 4.5 liter, it was a 3.5 liter turbo, 6-cylinder, put in the 7 series. The trouble is they couldn't do it for the right-hand drive market because it's a big fat turbo where the steering shaft goes through. So BMW is sitting there thinking, well, you know what, we could use a Halo model for our 7 series. We'll do it differently. We'll go to the M1 parts bin, the M1 sports car. We'll take that engine and we'll make a version of it. It wasn't the exact same engine, but it was the same block in effect. Call it detuned. They put this in the 745i. It developed about 280 horsepower. It was quite a good engine. It was a racing developed engine, so it was already good pedigree, non-turbo, but more power. It was the most powerful 745i at the time, globally. And what did they do with it? They went racing. I don't know if you heard of Group 1, basically British Touring Car Championships version in South Africa. Kyalami was a big one, also down in, I think, Killarney in Cape Town. A lot of racing. And the funny part was you had Golf GTIs, you had RX-7s, you had Alpha GTVs, Alphettas, Sierras, and you had this big, massive 7 series battling with them all. And guess what? It even won the championship once. Because of that, you had to homologate it, which meant at least 200 of these versions were built. Very small numbers, but they did it just to homologate it, and then it kind of went away when the next 7 series came out. But it illustrated that BMW South Africa had a little bit of autonomy, a little bit of free thinking, a lot of engineering spirit as well. And it just so happened that when BMW arrived in Rosslyn, they pulled the Land Rover production from Blackheath to Rosslyn as well. There was a 110 V8 3.5 sitting there in the workshop. And they were trying to figure out what to do with this, because the V8 wasn't good enough anymore, and it was disappearing anyway from the South African production line because there was no demand for it. It was sitting alongside what was then already the TDI, the 300 TDI, which was a rather good diesel engine. The V8 petrol was far too thirsty, and it didn't have enough power, weirdly enough, as a V8. I suppose in South Africa, the biggest trouble they have there is the topography, the geography of the place. There's a big coastline, which basically is sea level, but the Highveld, which is where Joburg is about 5,000 feet above sea level, if it's not more, 1,700 meters. And that makes a big difference on your engine, especially a petrol engine. The TDI was turbo. Turbo doesn't have as much trouble at high altitude, but the V8 suffers. And it uses a lot of fuel because you need to put it on your foot a lot more. So this 110 was sitting there, and the BMW guys were wondering, what can we do to change this situation? Because the Japs are there already with the Toyotas and the Nissans, Land Cruisers, the big 4.5 6-cylinder petrol engines, much higher capacity. And here was this V8 which wasn't working for Land Rover. Sitting right next to it, as the story goes, was a 325i, which needed a bigger engine. And a bigger engine in BMW speak means a 2.8i. So the engineer at the time, I think it was Frank Eisenberg, he took a tape measure to the 110, and he measured if this 6-cylinder diesel would fit in. And guess what? So I think over the weekend, as a side project, they shoehorned this BMW 6 2.8i into the Defender. And then I got on the phone to Munich and to Solihull, and they were trying to surreptitiously find parts to make this work. Because now you have a different bell housing, you need a different clutch, flywheel, all of this stuff. How can we do this? But we don't want anyone to know. So it took about, I think, 3 weeks, as the law goes. They got their parts in. Basically, they took the M51 engine, which was the diesel BMW engine in the P38A. They took the flywheel, the clutch, and maybe the bell housing, and they put that behind the M52. It needed a bespoke, that did need a bespoke bell housing because it was canted at 10 degrees instead of being straight up. So that had to change. They also had an input bearing, which needed a bit of work as well, which was a copper washer, which was also strange because Solihull versus Munich, the outer measurements was 32 millimeters, but the inner was 7/8 inches, imperial. One of the quirks as well, which also comes back to a little parallel with the Puma, with their output shaft adapter to the gearbox. So they managed to get these parts to work, mated it to the R380, and then they phoned Munich and said, guys, we've got a 6-cylinder Defender. What do you think? And Munich was like shocked. No, what's going on here? Solihull was shocked. What are you guys doing? Somehow, both sides were on board. And they said, okay, let's go for it. Let's do an engineering study, see how far this can go, because it sounds really good. What they needed to do then was to develop the 90 version, because they already had the 110, which was working. And they couldn't do that locally because there were no V8s available. So they brought in an NAS spec 90 from the US, soft top, brought it down to South Africa. And they needed to do that because the bell housing meant that the bulkhead was slightly different on the V8 compared to the TDI. There's a bit of wind going on. The bulkhead was a bit different because the engine was much longer now, so the whole thing had to fit into the bulkhead of the Defender, which is already quite narrow and tight. The original idea, by the way, was to fit this 6-cylinder into the Disco 1, and Solihull flatly refused. Absolutely not. So they thought, well, because the Disco 1 and the P38A are basically fully assembled imports, and only the Defender was CKD, the Defender's quite handy. The engines are here from BMW. Let's make them together. That's how this project kind of came to be. It was kind of a circumstantial, where a lot of stuff just happened to be in the same place, and these guys thought, let's make it work. So I had the 110 and the 90, and that's where the name came from, the Green Mamba, because the 90 was a soft top NAS spec Defender with a roll cage. Put the 6-cylinder engine in there, and off they went. And this thing was so fast compared to a standard Defender. It was nicknamed as fast as a green snake. Also because it had the Coniston green color scheme, and it could do about 170 kilometers an hour, and it could do 0 to 100 in under 10 seconds, which is just bonkers. It was the fastest Defender of its time, V8 included. What that meant was a lot of testing. They did about 100,000 kilometers worth of testing over at least 18 months. Some reports say it's 500,000 kilometers. That sounds like a lot. And what they found was this Defender 6-cylinder with a BMW heart, it outperformed anything the V8 could do at all. More power, it was more fuel efficient, it had long legs, it was crazy. The M52 engine, if we go into it a little bit more, 6-cylinder, 24 valve, it had the Vanos variable valve timing, at the time quite advanced. We know that from Toyota VVTi. It was a square engine, which means the bore and the stroke were both, I think, 84 millimeters, if I'm not mistaken. This meant it was super smooth. Ask Ferrari, they do a similar thing. Revved like anything, but the torque curve was really high. So it had 190 horsepower, 280 Newton meters, but at 3,500 revs, where a diesel will do that at 1,500. This meant engine braking was an issue, but also off-road. If you're having high revs, you don't have engine braking going downhill. So you need to step down your gearing. So they replaced the gearbox ratios with the 1.6. What this meant was super short ratios, which meant you can get some engine braking going downhill because now your revs are higher and you're hitting your torque curve on the engine. What you would think is that you would limit your top speed, because we've done this as well. When we got our 90, it had the short ratio gearbox in it and smaller tires, and it would rev flat out at 80 k's an hour, and you couldn't get any more out of it until you change the ratios and the tire size. But basically this BMW engine could rev to 6,000 RPM. So at 170, 180, you're hitting that limit, the engine's happy as anything. I obviously had to limit it to 160 because the thing started getting a little bit shaky, obviously, and for tire preservation as well. But it was just phenomenal, and this thing basically went straight through into production officially from Land Rover with a BMW engine back in 1997, and only for the South African market. They were in production for about 4 or 5 years. They built 1,395 of them, roughly half 90 and 110. Let's call it 650 90s, 700 something 110s. First couple of years were pretty good, about 400 units each per year, and then it tapered off quite a lot. In 1999, it upgraded a little bit because the TD5 had just come out. So it got the TD5 instrument dash and some upgrades, like the radiator core was now from BMW instead of Solihull, was a lot more reliable. It worked really well, except there were a couple of issues, obviously. The engine itself, basically bulletproof. It's BMW, well engineered, except it had some coolant issues if you didn't stay on top of that. The main issue was, just like the Puma, that input shaft bearing, or it was the clutch release bearing, that wore quite high because of the high revs. When you're literally going downhill, the clutch has a lot of strain put on it in that case. Why it didn't go overseas was because of various factors. Obviously, as I said, South Africa is a very specific place. That's the reason they wanted to put this super efficient, high revving petrol engine, which could do higher speeds, because the topography, the geography of the land is just so vast. Australians will know this, maybe the US as well. It's very different to Europe. And as you can even see, I'll drop in some footage here. There's just endless roads in the Karoo, especially, of nothing. So you're traveling a long distance on the road, but you need to get there quite comfortably. Your TDI, it's rattly, it's noisy, it vibrates. It doesn't get there very fast. Not very comfortable. A smooth 6-cylinder, much easier. And it's also pretty good off-road, so why not? Solihull was against this, because they came up with a TD5 around the year 99-2000. This was their way forward, much more refined than the TDI. It had the economy and it had the power as well. Also, by the year 2000, BMW had already started to divest itself of the whole Rover group. Obviously, they kept Mini, but MG Rover went and Land Rover went to Ford. And Ford said, guys, we've got engines. We don't need BMW in the mix as well. And that's why this kind of stopped. Only 1,400 units. It sounds like a lot of effort, a lot of testing, a lot of investment for a low amount of turnover. But that was the length they were willing to go to protect their product in the local marketplace. So I thought it was a rather interesting story, because it basically precedes most of what's happening today as well, where there's a huge penchant, as they say, putting the M57 engine into the Defender, reverse engineering it, because they really are that good. Also, if you think about Ineos Grenadiers coming out, both of them are 6-cylinder petrol and diesel. Both of them are from BMW. So to think about that as well. The only negative point to the M52, in my opinion, was that it didn't have enough torque low down. You really had to rev it a lot. It did make for a sporty drive. They are very well sought after globally. You can source them from quite a few different places. Incidentally, there's a red Mamba out there, which is basically the engineer, Eisenberg. He developed the M2. Can you believe that? So he knows what he's talking about. But he was in Germany and he was scouting around, and on the classifieds he found a red 2.8i Defender in South Africa, and he went over and bought it, which is enough. That says enough about the engineering design and the ethos behind it and the quality involved. They are well sought after. The value was also another thing. Back in the day, it was about 15 to 20% more than an equivalent 300 TDI. So you're paying a lot more for the engine. Obviously, the engineering involved, it needed a lot of bespoke parts in there as well. Also upgrades to the suspension and maybe the brakes as well. You know, you got to stop as well. Incidentally, the Green Mamba is a distant cousin of the Black Mamba snake. It is one of the most deadliest, venomous snakes in the world. That's probably why they also call it the Green Mamba. Also, if you ask South Africa about their passport, listen to what they have to say about that as well. If you want to watch some more playlist there's about 200 videos in the playlist of Land Rover, all things Land Rover. If you want links to the books below, the whole history of Land Rover, everything, including this little segue and a whole lot more, links are down in the description below. Thanks for watching this one. Catch you on the next one. Keep rolling.